Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, Bob Duff of HockeyDebates.com. And this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, coming to you twice a week to talk about everything that's going on in the world of hockey. And Bob, last weekend we had the NHL All-Star Game, and we've talked in the past, and even going into this, that the league attempted to try to spice it up a little bit by adding 3-on-3. Now that's sort of matured as the format of choice. I don't know. Some people wrote that the All-Star Game has outlived its usefulness. Are you among those, or do you think it still has a place?
I think it still has a place, but what I would like to see is them try alternating a whole bunch of different formats. I know Gary Bettman hinted at next year in Florida they're going to go with a more of an international flavor, so I wonder if they're going to do a 3-on-3 tournament where it's Canadians against Americans and Czechs and Russians and Slovaks and Swedes and Finns, and then you could have an all-world team where so there's a place for Anze Kopitar and Freddie Anderson and people like that to participate as well. And then I think if you change up the format every year, do something different, I think it keeps it fresh. Why not have go 1 year and have an exhibition game against the KHL All-Stars? I think the KHL All-Stars have figured out how to entertain. Their skills competition is one of the best things you can watch in hockey.
Well, I've said that for years, that it would be great if we could figure out a way to make it an international event, because as a general rule, fans like international. So if we could do KHL All-Stars, throw a bunch of money over at them to come over, or, maybe we could, bring in retired All-Stars and play. I mean, I don't know if that format would work, but anything, even like thinking back to the NFL days when the college All-Stars would play the Super Bowl champions. Why don't we take the best college players and put them in against the NHLers and see what happens? That could be fun. I'm sure what they would be fearful of is that the college boys. But I agree with you. You got to keep it spiced up. I don't know that it'll ever be totally competitive anymore, because players, have concerns about not getting hurt and the importance they are to their team and so forth. But I think the All-Star Game should always be preserved, as I've said many times, just because we always lose sight of the importance of it in the city in which it's held. It's always a big event. Everyone's happy to be there. There's always more kids at an All-Star Game than you see at a regular hockey game. I think everybody sees it like that. It's a way for the NHL to bring all of its corporate sponsorship. And I know everybody turns their nose up at the idea that, that the NHL should take care of their corporate sponsors. Well, those folks have forgotten what it was like in the 1980s when no company wanted to be associated with the NHL and its cartoon violence. So I have no problems with the NHL wanting to take care of its corporate sponsors by bringing them in for the All-Star Game. But I'm not sure this one was any better or any worse than the previous ones, and I think there's still room for it. But I like the idea of, you said, to kind of spice it up every year. But anyway, let's move on and start, kind of launch the second half of the season. And I wanted to start that out, Bob, by talking about 5 guys that you think that will be traded that will have the most impact on the on the playoffs. We can go one at a time. You do your number one, I'll do my number one, and we'll go back and forth.
Well, I always find this a difficult question to say this is the guy, because we always obsess over the big name players and where are they going to end up. But it always seems that it's that second tier guy that makes the difference. You look at what Charlie Coyle did for the Bruins last year. Nobody was going, ooh, the Bruins got Charlie Coyle when they picked him up at the trade deadline. But he was impactful for them in their Stanley Cup run. And often that's the case. It's not the team that grabs the A-lister. It's the team that grabs the good support guy. And a guy I think is really intriguing is Jean-Gabriel Pageau in Ottawa. He's a guy that would fit into anybody's system. He can play a 200-foot game, and he can score goals, and he has a history of scoring key, clutch, kind of timely goals. So I would think, even though he's not going to be the first name mentioned when the trade deadline shows go on the air, I think he's a guy that a lot of teams are going to cover.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Like he'd be a perfect fit, I think, for like Edmonton. I think they're looking for a number 3 center, and boy, he'd be one of the best number 3 centers going if he ended up on Edmonton. And the thing about it is, I think they want a fair return. They being the Senators, but I don't think you'll have to break the bank to get them. I don't think this is going to be highway robbery. I think that's a fair one. I took a more obvious choice. And that is Chris Kreider. He has said that there's no negotiations going on with the Rangers, so it looks like it's going to happen. And, Chris Kreider is one of the most consistent goal scorers that the league has in terms of, you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, when he's essentially been a 25 goal scorer for a long time. And, he can skate, he's bigger. I just think he's a perfect fit for the Boston Bruins. And I think this is a guy that would score some goals down the stretch, and I think he could be a big playoff performer given the right circumstances. So he's my number 1. And who's number 2 for you, Bob?
Well, obviously everybody's looking. Defense is kind of the pitching of hockey. You're always looking for more, no matter how much you have. And I think the defenseman that's going to covet spot at the top of the list of the eligible trade pickups is going to be Jeff Petrie, a guy that can work a power play. He can add your offense. He's probably not the most solid defensive defenseman, but I think he's gotten better in that area, and I think there's going to be a lot of teams kicking the tires on him.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. That's a guy that I think, just for the reasons that you mentioned, and I think he's ended up becoming a little better player than even scouts thought. I don't know that scouts viewed him as an impact player, but I think he has been an impact player at times during his career. So I like that choice as well. Again, I went with the scorer. I think there's a lot of teams looking for scorers. I went with Tyler Toffoli of the LA Kings. This is a guy that would be like a great fit for Calgary, who's looking for another scorer. It'd be a great fit at Edmonton. Be a great fit even for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're always, for as long as I can remember, and they've managed to win a couple of cups, they're always a scorer short in Pittsburgh, and this year's no exception with the injuries that they have. But somehow they usually get by without it. But I think Toffoli, if they could figure out a way to make it work in their cap, would also be a good fit for as well. And I think the Bruins have been involved there, and I've even heard that there's been some say the Bruins know exactly what they'd need to do or needed to give up in order to get him. So I think Toffoli would be a good pickup for most of the teams in the league that are looking for scoring. So at number 3?
Well, number 3, I'm going to go with a group effort here. You've got the worst team in the NHL, the Detroit Red Wings, has a bunch of veteran guys that they're certainly going to look to move. But I don't know myself, if I'm an NHL team, am I going to be a little wary of picking up a Mike Green or a Trevor Daley, because they've both been so injury prone the last couple of years, and you're getting them to be a depth guy for you, but still you need them to be healthy. And I don't know that those guys are the number 1 choices. But a guy that's kind of intriguing to me in Detroit, who's coming up to a new contract, Andreas Athanasiou. I got to think there's going to be teams that are going to see interest in him. He's a guy that has world-class speed, can get behind a defense, the kind of guy that, on a good team isn't going to have to play a major role, but could score you some big goals in key moments.
Yeah, just playing devil's advocate here, would the Red Wings be better off, trading him in the off season, just because this hasn't been the best of seasons for him. He's been injured. He didn't score when he was in. Where you tend to when there's an off season trade, you tend to sort of eliminate the previous season, and they might look at his body of work, which includes the 30-goal season, before. So would they be better off trading him in the summer, or do you think they could do it at the trade deadline?
Well, I think they're going to try. Whether they get what they want from him, you may be right. They may be better off waiting until the off season to move him. And of course, he's out with an injury right now, so
right.
If he doesn't get healthy soon, it could be a moot point, because you're certainly not going to risk a lot of assets on a guy if you don't know who's going to play.
Yeah, and I think they have to get a defenseman for him. I mean, it sure feels like that's what they need to do is to add one more young defenseman. And I've heard the Islanders mentioned with him. I've heard the Penguins mentioned with Anthony CU as well. So there's some options as well. All you got to do is look at the list of teams looking for scores, and Anthony CU would fit that. My number three guy is a defenseman, Alec Martinez of the Los Angeles Kings. And what I like about him is this is a guy that's won before. He knows what it takes to be in the postseason and to be successful. And I think it's a guy that he's not going to wow you, but I think he does everything reasonably well. And I think he'd be a great fit for a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs or any of the teams that are looking for defensive help or to round out their defense. Maybe even the Dallas Stars as well. I think they're looking for a defenseman as well. And now with the injury that with Hamilton going down to Carolina, would the Carolina Hurricanes be interested in Martinez as well? So he's my number three. Not a name that is going to get everybody excited and be pretty valuable to any team. And your number four pick, Bob?
I'm kind of debating between a few guys here, and you're also kind of wondering what certain teams are going to do. Like Chicago looks like they're back in the race now, so I don't think they're going to move one of their goalies, which a lot of people thought earlier in the year would be the case. So I think Robin Leonard's probably off the table at this point, unless they get an offer that is absolutely unbelievably, they can't turn it down. But I think you're looking at teams, you're trying to look at needs, and I know, do teams trade for needs as much at the trade deadline, or are they just looking for an impact guy? Because a guy that probably wouldn't cost you a whole lot that could be really impactful in your bottom six forwards and as a penalty killer, and a guy that even though he's playing on a team that doesn't win, I think is a winner, is Luke Glendening. And I know the analytics guys can't stand him, but he just does the things that coaches look for in the playoffs. He kills penalties. He blocks shots. Every shift he plays like his life's depending on it. And I think, if I'm a contender and I could add him to my third or fourth line, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think there are some writers out west that think he's going to end up back reunited with Ken Holland in Edmonton. Ken obviously knows him very well. Glendening is a feisty player. He doesn't give a quarter. Has got some skating ability. You can put him on the ice trying to preserve a lead with a minute to go, and I think he's a pretty hard-nosed guy, and I see him as a guy that could be attractive for a team that could be in a playoff hunt. I'm going with another guy that's hard to play against, and Brendan Dillon, the defenseman. I think there's a lot of interest in him just because he's just a pain in the rump out there, and I think he's the type of guy that again doesn't do a lot, but what he does pretty well. And I think he's pretty effective. And when you're, usually, you got your top pairing set. You're just looking for a guy to plug in and just fill that hole in the middle of your defense. And I think Dylan's the type of guy that could do that. And now let's go to our final picks of the five guys that we think could change their teams if they're traded before the trade deadline. Bob, number 5 for you.
Oh, you got me on the spot here. I really don't know. You've grabbed most of my guys that I had on my list. I feel like, when you're at the fantasy draft and you had your list of guys, right before you takes your guy and you don't know what to do. I kind of feel like that right now. And I look at teams that are kind of, on the bubble of being in or out. Like, what do you do if you're the Buffalo Sabres? Are you buying? Are you selling? They've got some pieces that would be attractive to teams, but they also believed they were going to be a playoff team this year, and again, it hasn't happened. So, that's the other thing about the NHL today, too. You look at how quickly a team goes from being out of the playoffs to in, and with this parity and with, half the teams in the league missing. That year ago, we probably would have looked at Arizona as a seller, and now they're right there in the hunt. But I think I'll go back to goaltending, because if you're a team like the Calgary Flames, are you happy with your goaltending, or do you try to get a guy like a Robin Lehner and see if you can pry him out of Chicago? Because I know David Riddick went to the All-Star game, but I don't think, based on what happened in last year's playoffs, Calgary's all that sold on what they have between the pipes.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I wouldn't rule out Chicago, moving a goalie, but I wonder if they want to move Mark Crawford. Um, who knows? I mean, it could be one of those cases. It wasn't that long ago, and the fans in Detroit will remember where, it came down between Hossa and Franzen, and it was whoever signed first, and Franzen signed before Hossa. That so, and the Detroit fans suffered because of that deal. Well, it may be one of those situations with Chicago. They just, as long as they got one of the two, they could trade someone. But I actually have a fifth, and I got an honorable mention, and I think they're two players worth discussing. And I think it's a bit of an oddball pick, but I don't think people are thinking in this regard because he's traditionally stayed right where he's at. And I'm talking about Joe Thornton. And Joe Thornton, of course, has not had an unbelievable season. But I still find when you watch him play that he's still one of the keenest passers in the game today. And I wonder if he wouldn't be an incredible fit for a team like the Boston Bruins, who's looking for someone to put in the top nine. A Calgary, Flames, again, looking for the same thing. The Pittsburgh Penguins, playing on a wing. Is he the type of guy that could come in and help somewhere? You're going to ask him to play 12 minutes. He's a smart player. He's not going to hurt you defensively. And, when you're trying to get some scoring, secondary scoring, he may not be able to score the goal, but he can set up that goal that you need on that third line. And I think it might be time for Joe to accept, being moved. I think his time has run out in San Jose. I would assume they're going to embrace some measure of rebuild there, and I think it's time for the Joe Thornton. And I've got an honorable mention on my list too. And we wouldn't have talked about this before. In fact, we debated whether or not it was even a good signing for the Montreal Canadiens to sign Ilya Kovalchuk. But now, I wonder if moving him might be the thing to do, for teams that are tight on the salary cap and just need a guy that, to fit in their top nine that could score and maybe provide some secondary scoring. So, I think that he could be interesting as well.
Well, he's, as you say, he's playing basically now for the NHL minimum, so he fits into pretty much anybody's salary cap.
Right.
There was a lot of speculation that he'd end up in Boston when LA was looking to move him out. So, you talk about Boston with Thornton, Boston and Kovalchuk could be a fit. Although I'd love to see you be right and see Joe Thornton go to Boston. Wouldn't that be
it'd be ironic.
His career, that he go back and finally win his Stanley Cup with the team that drafted him first overall? I mean, those are the kind of stories we as journalists dream of, right? It kind of reminds me of the Ray Bourque thing when you talk about Joe's been there forever. Whoever thought Ray Bourque would leave the Bruins, but he did, so he'd have his shot at winning the cup. And this would be, I think Joe wants to win a cup. I mean, everybody wants to win a cup. He has to realize that he's not going to get it now in San Jose. They're certainly going toward the rebuild mold. So if he wants a cup, he's going to have to accept a move somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's true too. And with regard to Kovalchuk, I was thinking about this. It would be like Jimmy Rutherford being the skilled horse trader that he is. That to get the guy that he wants, to Foley or one of the scorers that's in list, and then also to add Kovalchuk. Now the Kovalchuk thing, he's just he's a nothing salary, so you can fit him under. To get someone else, he's going to have to move someone because they're a little tight on the cap. So, that'd be the kind of move that Rutherford makes. He could end up with two moves, and wouldn't that team be stronger if they could add a couple, scorers to the mix? Anyway, I wanted to ask you too, as well, since we're starting the post All-Star, the second half of the NHL season. Last year, there was a lot made about Craig Berube changing everything in St. Louis. Everybody knows the story. Last in the NHL in the first few days of January, and then of course won the Stanley Cup. And a lot of it was put on Berube, who changed the culture there. But really, the key for all that was Binnington. This is the goalie who really came out of nowhere to become such a stopper, and really changed everything. It just had an incredible postseason run. Now, I'm not asking to have a similar situation, a guy coming out of nowhere, but historically, Bob, there usually is one goalie every year who ends up with, the 945, 48 save percentage, who plays above where he's played in the past, and then just looks invincible at times. And, we've seen it. Jonathan Quick comes to mind, John Sebastian Giguère, just a guy that really kind of steps up and, performs. Tim Thomas, had just incredibly gaudy numbers the year they won. That steps up. Is there a guy out there that you see that could have those numbers this year and be that guy that could step up and do that?
I think the guy that you'd first think of is the guy that's doing it right now, and that's Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh. And he's putting up those kind of numbers for the Penguins. I mean, he is a guy that, similar ways to Binnington, did come out of nowhere. No one expected him to be Pittsburgh's goalie this year, and yet here he is doing it. But I'm going to go with another guy, a guy that I know well from his days in Windsor, Philip Grubauer in Colorado. I've seen him take Windsor to the Memorial Cup and get on fire like that and just be unbeatable in the playoffs. And I think he's the kind of guy, and people forget that in 2018 when Washington won the Cup, the guy they originally rolled with in goal was Grubauer. He played the first couple of games before they went back to Holtby. So, Barry Trotz had enough faith in him back then to think he could win him a cup in Washington with a team that was a legitimate contender. And I think Colorado's a team that's right there, ready to jump up with the elite. And he could be a guy that is a difference maker for them.
Yeah, I like that election.
Well, it appears we've lost Kevin's feed. We'll try to get him back as quickly as possible. We were talking about goalies that could step up and be big in the playoffs. I mentioned Philip Grubauer from Colorado, someone that I know from his time with the Windsor Spitfires, winning the Memorial Cup with them in 2010, and a guy that Washington did originally try to roll with in 2018 as the go-to goalie when they won the Stanley Cup. Guy that's with a team now at Colorado let Semyon Varlamov go because they believe Grubauer is their guy, and he's certainly going to get that chance in the playoffs this year. We also discussed Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh, who is certainly putting up those numbers right now. A guy that, again, like Jordan Binnington last year with St. Louis, wasn't expected to be the team's go-to goalie, but he's kind of usurped that position from Matt Murray, who not so long ago was that guy who came out of nowhere and won 2 cups in a row for the Penguins. So, we may not even be thinking of the guy who it's going to be, because we've certainly seen in recent years that goaltenders that weren't expected to be Stanley Cup winners have come in and done that job. Murray winning 2 in a row in Pittsburgh. Even Braden Holtby originally wasn't a guy they thought was going to be a cup winner in Washington, and he's won Vezinas and Cups since, and is certainly for a guy that wasn't a high draft pick has become an elite NHL goalie. Goaltending is kind of like that X factor. You just don't know who's going to be the guy. That's why teams are so afraid to spend high draft picks in the first round on a goalie, because it is such a crapshoot. And generally, goalies don't hit their prime as pros until they're late, their mid 20s. I would say 23, 24, 25 is when you really start to see a goaltender step forward and become an NHL elite netminder. Going to try to get Kevin back here if we can, and hopefully he's going to join us soon. We're going into they call it the second half of the season, but it really isn't, because there's only for most teams, just over 30 games to play. And certainly there's some teams that, it looks like we got Kevin. There's Kevin. How you doing?
I'm back. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, well, technology is a wonderful thing until it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I think where we left off is I was talking about Vasilevsky, and I just think people are not, forgetting about the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they got off to a poor start, but they showed themselves to be the team that we thought they were going to be, and they still have the psychological hurdle of getting by the first round, because we all know last year they were swept by Columbus, of course, but. Vasilevsky is a guy that's just capable of just carrying, and he can carry a team, and he's a guy that could post like a .950 save percentage over 20 games. Like, he's certainly capable of that. And I think he has the team and the defense that could do that. And I want to just mention another goalie here as well, Elvis Merzlikins of the Columbus. What do you think will happen, Bob, when Korpisalo comes back out of injury? Like, Elvis has been so good, and the old adage is that you shouldn't lose your job because of injury. But what do you do here? Like, if you're John Tortorella, how does this work? Do you give Corp as soon as he's ready? Is he back in the net, or what? How do you play this if you're John?
Well, the other adage that's as old as hockey itself is you ride the hot goalie. You're not going to sit a goalie down who's playing out of his mind. You're going to keep going with him until the hot streak is over. So I would think that Elvis is going to be the guy they'll ride until he stops stopping them. And then they know they've got a guy behind him who's proven to be a reliable NHL goalie. So they're in a win-win situation, really.
Yeah. What's your read on Elvis? Is he hot or is he good?
I've talked to a couple of scouts, and they think he's hot. They don't think. I was talking to a scout about, Merzlikins and Shesterkin, the two kind of hot goaltending commodities that everybody's been waiting to see. And most scouts that I've talked to think Shesterkin's going to be the better of the two. He's the guy that's legit, and they think Elvis is going to be a guy that he's going to be in the league, but he's not going to be a star.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that Columbus team is a pretty good team, I think, and they're kind of a sleeper team for me. But they got to get great goaltending. They're hard to play against, but they're not going to be a team that's going to win with average or even slightly above average goaltending. I think they need exceptional goaltending if they want to make an extended run. Anyway, we're about out of time for today. You've been listening to the Hockey Debates podcast. We come to you twice a week, and we'll see you later in the week. Thanks for joining us.
Everybody have a great day.